Braking performance. Brake lever stiffness matches flagship models. The long brake levers deliver linear response with just a light squeeze, thanks to the front and rear hydraulic disc brakes. While the price reflects various thoughtful details, the braking power itself is one area where nothing is compromised. Tires with grip that resist sideways drift. However, even with good braking power, sudden stops can be scary due to lack of tire grip, and skidding is common. Yet even braking hard from around 40 to 50 kilometers per hour, it didn't skid sideways. Both the stock tires and braking power were excellent, with the suspension performing as well as it looks. A BS intervention is quick, but what caught my attention was how quickly the ABS kicked in during a full stop from around 50 kilometers per hour. Although only the front wheel has ABS, is the intervention level different from domestic manufacturer scooters? I always perform the same hard braking tests, but the intervention felt early. Maneuverability and straight line stability, winding road, slaloms, cornering. Despite being labeled an SRGT 200, the steering feels lighter compared to other 200cc bikes. In reality, it handles as lightly as a Class 2 motorcycle. Plus, the self-steering works exceptionally well. It's easier to handle than expected, more so than its appearance suggests. It's truly perfect for city riding. On the highway, I noticed a lack of straight line stability, but this becomes an advantage in city riding, and the unsprung weight is incredibly light. Riding it, whether flitting around or going straight, it doesn't feel like a typical scooter comparison with other 150/160cc bikes. After riding it, I got back on my own Majesty S, and it suddenly felt as heavy as a big bike. I think this is due to the double cradle frame and fuel cap placement, but it also didn't feel particularly tail heavy. When accelerating out of corners, I expected a typical scooter rear end heaviness and wobble, but it was nothing like that at all. It actually felt easier to hold a line than on the PCX or NMAX. However, with a 14-inch front and 13-inch rear wheel setup like the PCX, it seems aimed at straight line stability. Yet, compared to the PCX, it felt more agile but slightly lacking in straight line stability. Straight line stability and high speed behavior. Visually, it looks like it might be cumbersome but stable. I felt the opposite. It has 17.4 horsepower, but my honest impression is that the chassis doesn't match this engine. It could go a bit faster, but you might think that since it has more horsepower than other scooters, it should be easier to ride at high speeds. However, once you get past the slightly floaty feeling where the front tire seems like it might lift, you can cruise at higher speeds than other light motorcycles, but it's not comfortable. Ride comfort and handling suspension behavior. The dual rear shock absorbers have a remarkably long stroke, as you can see. Perhaps because of this, the front suspension feels like it has a short stroke and doesn't move much. It might actually be moving, but the rear suspension absorbs impact from small bumps to large ones, stroking significantly. To describe it verbally, the front suspension feels like a slight thud when it compresses, while the rear suspension has more of a brush feel. Regarding the rear suspension, I expected it to be more sport-tuned with lower damping force, but it was actually the opposite. It had high damping. It's quite similar to the PCX. Handling due to tires and vehicle weight. Looking solely at the vehicle weight of 148 kilograms, it seems quite heavy, but it didn't feel that way. Perhaps because the unsprung weight isn't heavy, it felt light when maneuvering in and out of convenience stores. It handles just like a 130 kilogram class light motorcycle. Side stand characteristics and center stand. The side stand is on the short side. While it generally requires about 1.5 times the width compared to leaning it on the center stand, it doesn't lean out as far. Using the center stand, it felt incredibly light. Is it the center of gravity or just because it's new? It doesn't feel like it weighs 140 kilograms. Ground reach and foot placement set height and shape. The seat is wide, making ground reach difficult, and it had a slight firmness. However, the PCX seat is firmer overall. Ground reach was quite challenging. Even at 182 centimeters tall, reaching the front foot pegs was borderline flat-footed. Moving slightly back on the seat meant only my toes touched. When I sat back fully against the seat, I actually found standing on one foot easier. Floor space and riding position. The most disappointing part of the SRGT 200 was this footrest area. The floor space, especially the sloped floor space, is so slippery it feels like someone sprinkled powder on it. I've never encountered footrests this slippery before. If sneakers slip this much, leather shoes would be too slippery and make your feet slide. Because of this, I could only sit with my legs folded at a 90-degree angle. Tandem performance, rear seat. I tried riding in the back with the center stand up. The rear seat is barely possible for 2 men, but the grab handles are easy to hold on to, and the width of the pillion step is quite good. The grip on the rear footrest in particular is undeniably more effective than the floorboard's anti-slip surface. It's a mystery why this anti-slip material isn't used on the floor space too. Is there some reason for this? Cargo capacity and storage cargo hooks under seat. Storage capacity. Front hook helmet compatibility. I tried fitting a shell-wide 8 helmet in there, but it barely didn't fit. It's an XL size, so it's understandable, but a jet helmet might fit. The under seat storage is typical for scooters, deep at the front, not as deep at the rear. Size-wise, it's slightly larger than the new NMAX. Inner pocket. It has that mysterious Type A charging port, reminiscent of the 3rd generation Tricity. As an inner pocket, it's quite small. I tried plugging in a charging cable, but no matter how I positioned it, the cord got caught during opening and closing. I'm not quite sure how it's supposed to be used. The Tricity had a cigarette lighter socket, but it was in such a tiny space I couldn't figure out how to use it either. This reminded me of that. Lights, gauges, and handling headlight and position lamps. First off, it looks cool. The position lamps and headlight are all LED, and the design is absolutely outstanding. Well, that's subjective, of course. However, the headlight doesn't follow the bike's movement when you turn it. Since the headlights don't point in the direction of travel, the beam pattern, light output, and coverage area become crucial. The high beams are particularly problematic. Even a slight upward adjustment to the beam pattern and increased light output would make night riding on unlit mountain roads impossible. You'd have no idea where the road continues. I played around with it in a tunnel, but even then, it felt a bit scary. Turn signals and rear view mirror. The turn signals are also LED, and I felt the rear view mirror prioritized design over function. The reasons compared to a round mirror, the field of view is narrower, and about a third of my own shoulder was reflected. Plus, roughly 1/5 to 1/10 of the outer edge of the mirror isn't 3-dimensional, further limiting the visible area. So if I were to customize anything, it would definitely be the mirror. I grumbled about this to myself. I ended up visually checking behind me every time before changing lanes. Main switch and meter panel specifications. Regarding the meter, Honda's digital meter is the easiest to read among digital meters. This was undeniable. The reason is simple, it's the brightest. Honda's meter was easy to see even under the sun, especially during this intense heat wave. But the Aprilia's was slightly harder to read. Like the NMAX, the lower part of the meter is easy to see, but the upper part has small text and is hard to read. And my clothes constantly reflect on it, and in tunnels it looks cool and is easy to see. This feels very similar to Yamaha's digital meter. The tachometer and speed display were clearly visible. Above all, having a tachometer added both design appeal and practicality, making it more interesting. Pressing the mode switch button displays voltage and temperature. It can connect to Aprilia's official smartphone app, but I didn't use it this time. Overall evaluation and summary. As the manufacturer's catalog page states, the SRGT delivers unbeatable performance for urban commuting and handles suburban adventures with ease. However, it falls short of domestic manufacturers' scooters in minor details, and since it's geared towards city riding, I found myself wishing the suspension could better utilize the engine's potential. On the way back from the rental, I muttered to myself, but then realized if they increased the suspension stiffness any further, wouldn't it just become an adventure bike? The SRGT 200 occupies that middle ground between a scooter and an adventure bike, and I think it'd be great to see more scooters fitting that adventure scooter niche. Overall assessment, it reaffirmed the high level of refinement achieved by domestic manufacturers' scooters. The starting price is around 600,000 yen, but with successive price hikes, it doesn't feel that high anymore. However, maintenance costs and fuel expenses remain unknown factors, so it could end up being expensive. Design-wise and in terms of its position within the scooter market, it doesn't overlap much with other models, making it a scooter or bike that stands out. For those who want something different, it might be worth considering.